it says the future of ethnobotany, but I didn't mean to be so presumptuous. So this is just a possible vision of how people and plants will interact in the future. Part of my work involves imagining what that interaction might be. So what I cover is mostly how indigenous knowledge may be applied to the most advanced technologies that we have available to us. My work is done at Harvard University, where I look at a lot of the archives of ethnobotany, so the work of Richard Schultes and other ethnobotanists, and move into the MIT Media Lab, which I'll discuss in a second. So if you're not familiar with the Harvard Herbarium, this is where the Economic Botany collection is of Richard Schultes, originally received from Kew Botanical Gardens, and then by Asa Gray, then received by Oaks Ames. So these are kind of the legendary names of where we get even the term economic botany just a couple weeks ago. So you may, if you're not familiar with this picture, this is Richard Schultes in the National Laboratory in Harvard University with a lot of his ethnobotanical collections that he made over the decades. And just a couple weeks ago, I gave a talk where I reassembled many of those objects. If you notice, this front table is somewhat similar to this from that painting, so that we could start to reintroduce people, especially at Harvard, where ethnobotany kind of had some of its beginnings in the Western world and in the US in particular, to get people reinterested in this subject generally. But then I take that knowledge and thinking about how people and plants interact to a place that's known for its scary robots and other types of future fiction type stories, and that's the MIT Media Lab. Most of the work done there is focused on artificial intelligence, robotics, things like this. Things that if you see something with MIT and a scary robot, it's probably coming out of the Media Lab. But what I work in is the Open Agriculture Initiative. So we're actually bringing plants and how people and plants interact. My title actually is Ethnobotanist at this crazy futuristic place, so it's really fun to introduce the idea of human-plant interactions. And this is one of the places where we grow the plants, and I'll go further into how we actually do that. So why are we approaching agriculture in this place that's super futuristic and really dreaming about what the future is going to be? Well, what we're preparing for is what is thought to be the coming fourth agricultural revolution, starting with hunter-gatherers becoming farmers themselves and domesticating crops, then new technologies including the horse and plow, tractors and harvesting, then to what we consider the current state of agriculture, where we have synthetic fertilizers, genetic engineering. Even those things are things that we're doing now that are impacting agriculture and how people use plants. And when I say agriculture, I also mean medicinal plant crops as well as food crops. And part of my task is to envision what that fourth revolution will be. So what we have come to is a digital open source revolution. Open source because a lot of these technologies are already starting to emerge, some of the things I'll be talking about, but they're privatized. So most of these things are held by the elite, wealthy few, and our mission is to democratize this knowledge, to have people, rather than be subject to emerging technologies, be a part of that emerging technology. So the first thing that we need are farmers. Right, so how do we get new farmers? We have a problem where the number of farmers around the world is decreasing. And what we have developed is called the personal food computer. So the personal food computer is a box that's approximately 30 centimeters square that we can grow plants inside in highly controlled environments. And the reason we do this is because that is where current agricultural revolutions are happening. We have a number of companies around the world that are starting to look at the value of creating these highly controlled environments, but we want people around the world and all types of communities that have the ability to use those items. So what we've spent is the past 5 to 8 years actually developing from very nascent beginnings all the way to what we have now, which are the personal food computers. They're machine printable, and all the plants for these are open source. So anyone can go and download the plants for these for under $300. You can build these. They're highly controlled, miniature controlled environments where you can program in exact climate-controlled recipes and then have some phenotypic expression of the plant. So this allows for the ideas and experimentation for how plants will grow as climate change comes. This is something I'll talk about in a minute. to think about how you might produce a product in this type of environment. These are some more images of the flat pack of how it's built. And we've actually brought these into middle schools and in high schools around the country, and we have them actually all over the world now, and I'll talk more about that impact. But another thing we need to think about are farms. So how do we bring farms into this fourth agricultural revolution? This is our farm in the Media Lab, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. As again, we went through many years of iterations until we had a shipping container size unit that is highly controlled, and again, all open source. The way I like to describe it is the whole plant bioreactor. So bioreactors are something that are very tied to the emerging technologies, especially in the Boston-Cambridge area and San Francisco. How do we develop natural products or even protein drugs? They're usually done in bioreactors. So you can think about these containers that we have as a whole plant bioreactor. We can actually control the entire plant as it grows. And the real value of this is that we can now develop tools for experimentation. So what will climate change do as time goes on to the plant itself? How will it change the chemistry of the plant? But we can also develop tools for production. So we can actually use these containers to grow things. We can collect all types of data, so we're, even in those small personal food computers I was talking about, we're constantly collecting data and sending it up to the cloud. So some central data repository that includes images of the plant to collect and correlate chemical information to the plant as it grows. We collect inside both the large containers and the small containers everything from the composition of the air inside that container to pH to chemical information. This is one example of the type of chemical information we get, and you may think, well, if I were to grow a plant there, how different can I get the chemistry to be? This is an example of 4 different basil plants that were collected, and each different color in this figure is a different volatile, so basically a different flavor. So you can see just by these 4 different growing environments, we get vastly different chemistry just in the flavor alone. We can also do this with pharmaceutical compounds. So I did a lot of work looking, basil, I mentioned basil because it's kind of our lab rat of experimentation. It comes up very quickly, we can grow pretty fast. And we published a paper a month ago where we showed that we could optimize basil for flavor, but we're currently working to optimize for specific potential medicinal compounds. And first we might grow many different varieties. We select a variety and grow under a variety of experimental conditions. We got some press that MIT researchers hacked agriculture to create what may be the tastiest basil on earth. So we basically harassed the basil into a state where it produced the most amount of volatiles that a panel found were delicious. The way that we do this is we utilize artificial intelligence and machine learning, which means we take a whole bunch of data from all those inputs I was talking about, including chemical data. We input that into our machine learning models. Then we get indicators about what environmental factors are impacting the growth of that plant the most, and then we keep iterating that until we have optimized that particular parameter. So the general idea of this is we design a recipe. So by recipe, I mean a growth recipe. So how do we want to grow this? Of those 45 factors, we can change what do we want to start with. We grow the plants to maturity. We then measure, in this case, volatiles. We're talking about flavor, but it could be any particular compound or compounds of interest. We then think about what the target metric is. So if it's flavor, it may be a combination of volatiles. If it's a pharmaceutical compound, it may be one particular compound, or it could be a synergistic mixture. Then we build those machine learning models. We find out what the next optimization might be, and we do this again. And in the course of a few generations, we can find boundary conditions for that. So one application for this is climate manufacturing. So one project that we recently completed in India is with what we call the cotton server. So server as in like a computer server. We grew cotton in our containers in Cambridge, and we also had it growing in India. We went to India and set up these containers under optimized conditions so they can constantly collecting this information and optimizing. And what we were able to do in just one generation between the 2 sites in Cambridge and India is improve the strength, length, and uniformity of cotton. So this can be now used as a production unit for them in a changing climate where they don't have the same opportunities. But on the other side, besides manufacturing, we can also think about climate prospecting. So where in the world might be best to grow some particular crop? So what we've been doing is we work with a company company Ferrero, you may be familiar with Nutella or Ferrero Rocher chocolate. They're very interested in growing better, bigger hazelnut trees. But most hazelnut trees, about 80% are grown in Turkey. So they'd like to be able to grow them in other parts of the world. So the first container that we built is 3 by 3 by 6 meters. And now we've just built a 9 by 9 by 12 meter unit where we can grow trees in a highly controlled environment, collecting all those parameters and iterating with the machine learning model. And what we're able to find is there are very particular places that we can replicate those climates inside this box and show that when we subject the plant to particular environmental extremes, we can exclude 90% of the plants and then focus on 1 or 2 particular cultivars that will be best to grow in some particular part of the world. So this saves people and companies lots of money because now they can say, well, the best place to grow hazelnuts will be Chile or South Africa or some particular place because we've replicated in the container and collected that information. And this is just some of that data. What we first do is we check in boundary conditions, as I mentioned, so environmental extremes. So as of now, we have this technology in 65 countries around the world in some form, whether it's in the form of the food server or the personal food computer. And we have a community of over 3,000 people that are collecting data, uploading it into the cloud, so all this information is constantly being uploaded, and then all that information is shared. So if someone were to grow a particularly tasty basil in their personal food computer, it's available to anyone. And anyone can then download that climate recipe and use their food computer to grow it in that way. And we see this as a way of integrating the ideas of the internet, the World Wide Web. How do we integrate people around the world to use the agricultural knowledge, emerging fourth revolution agricultural knowledge, to share and build on that? Another project that we're working on with this, I just wanted to add this as a side note because I think it may be interesting to a lot of people. We just got funding from the Rockefeller Foundation to produce the National Produce Chemotyping database. So in this database, what we're doing is we're collecting fresh produce at the point of sale from around the country and cataloging a complete metabolome, so meaning as much chemical diversity as we can in those objects, and we're collecting all the associated metadata and how that might correlate with each other, and it's all open source. So as we collect this data, it will be available on the database and say, does an apple, some particular cultivar of apple that is bought in a small store in Alabama, how does that compare to an apple in a bodega in New York City, bought in March, at this time of day, whatever. All that metadata will be collected, and you can start to do those types of studies. This is something that hasn't been done before. And we see recommendations from physicians and government about what particular type of vegetable or fruit you might eat, but what does that actually mean? What is the actual chemical composition and variability of that fruit or vegetable as it sits on the shelf? So I'm going to leave it there. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.